Hi, I'm Aaron Larsen. I'm the founder of GrandparentsAcademy.com, and I'm here today to share with you what I have found are the essential elements for helping alienated or estranged grandparents see their grandkids again. Now, I'll be completely upfront and tell you that I can't guarantee the date when this is going to happen for you in terms of reconciliation. If that's going to happen today, tomorrow, or you're going to see your grandkids a year from now, I can't tell you when that's going to be. I don't have a crystal ball, and I wish I could because I would tell you. But what I can tell you is that the essential elements you'll hear about in this presentation have helped grandparents in similar situations to build that bridge, to reconnect with their families, to experience this reconciliation and see their grandkids today. So I'm happy to share what I've learned with you today. And my hope and desire is that you'll take away something out of this presentation. You'll hear the right message at the right time, and it will resonate with you, and it will help you on your reconciliation journey. So let's talk real quick about what you can expect to take away from this webinar. Our learning objectives today are to first understand your current zone using the grandparent-parent relationship matrix. Next, learn the essentials and the benefits of strategic communication and commitment to growth. Learn the 3 G's of growth and how they can help in your reconciliation journey. Learn about how to create a strategic engagement plan. And finally, learn about the importance of forming a reconciliation team. So I hope by now you have a pen and pencil and a notepad ready because, as you can see, we're going to cover a lot today in a short amount of time. And it's really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to helping alienated and estranged grandparents on their reconciliation journey. So I hope you're ready to take some great notes. But before we dive into that content, I just wanted to share a little bit about myself so you understand, who is this guy talking about reconciliation and what qualifies me to be speaking about this topic. So as you may have assumed, I'm not a grandparent. I don't have any grandchildren. I'm not an attorney or a lawyer. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a mental health counselor. So anything you hear today that come from this presentation, it should not be considered legal advice. It shouldn't be considered health advice of any sort, mental health advice. I am not an expert in those fields. However, I am a parent of 2 young children. I'm a millennial, so chances are I share a similar life stage and can bring certain insights to the equation from this generation that might help you, assuming that your kids are probably in the same generation or somewhere close to that. So I do provide that sort of insight that you might not be hearing from other thought leaders and experts in the space. Also, I am a communications professional. I have made a career out of helping companies really connect and engage with their audiences, mostly online, but also here in the real world as well. So it's all about strategic communication and helping those really effectively deliver the messages that they want to deliver in the right time and in the right way. So that has been my career for the better part of a decade, a little bit over. And that's what I've been doing. I'm also the founder of GrandparentsAcademy.com, as I mentioned at the very beginning. And this is a website that's designed for helping grandparents grow meaningful relationships and rich legacies with their loved ones. I started this back in 2011 when I was living with my Granny Grit. And long story short, I just have a passion for helping grandparents to nurture those strong bonds because I was blessed with some amazing grandparents in my life who truly made an impact. And I believe with my whole heart that grandparents and grandchildren, they need to be together. Those intentional grandparents who are healthy and positive influences on the lives of their grandchildren. They should be connected with grandchildren because grandkids are facing a world that's different in so many ways than what we grew up with. They face new challenges and distractions, and it takes more than just a set of parents to help effectively raise these grandkids in this new world. We need all the help that we can get, and I truly believe that. Now, all that to say, as a communications professional, as a consultant, and as a coach, I've also been helping grandparents like yourself for the past 7 years through grandparentsacademy.com and also other organizations and nonprofits. I've hosted an online forum for alienated and estranged grandparents through Grandparents Academy. And I have master classes and resources that I've created for people like you who are experiencing this. So I'm no stranger to what's going on in terms of the research behind it, what exists. I've interviewed and collaborated with the top leaders in this space who address this issue. So I'm familiar with what's out there, and I've been in the front lines, and I've helped grandparents, and I can certainly help you with what I've learned. So that's why I've put this webinar together, and that's a little bit more about me. I'll share more about some of my experiences as we get along here into the presentation. But I just wanted to start there so you have an understanding of where I come from, what perspective I bring to the mix, because it is a different take and it's a different approach and perspective than maybe what you've heard in the past. And so I just hope that you'll be open to hearing some of that coming from a different messenger, because sometimes the right message is heard for at the right time, but it just comes from a different messenger. So I hope you'll be open to receiving that today. So let's dive into what I consider are the essentials. The first essential is really understanding where are you at today in terms of your relationship with the parents. And over the years, I've looked at, how do you really pinpoint where a grandparent is along the reconciliation journey. And so what I've come up with is something I call the grandparent-parent relationship matrix. And you can see here that we have 4 different zones. The zone 1 is the cooperation zone. And then as we're moving down to zone 2, we see the caution zone. Back up to the upper right is zone 3, the challenge zone. And zone 4 is the cancellation zone. And you'll see the different axes we have here. We have the x-axis, which is all about access, basically. To the left, we have complete access with grandkids, and to the right is access is prohibited. And then at the very top, we have healthy communication with parents. And at the bottom is toxic communication with parents. Now, as you're looking at this, it's important to note that you could be in different places within one of these zones. So you could be all the way to the top left, where we talk about having complete access and healthy communication. Maybe you have so much complete access and healthy communication that the parents are championing you, that you're collaborating together, not just cooperating, but you're like functioning as one, as a team. And that certainly is the ideal, right? But in most cases, you will be somewhere closer to the middle line for each one of these, closer to the center. And it varies in different seasons. So one season you might have an argument and you're more in the caution zone or in the challenge zone. Or if you're watching this and you've been completely cut off from your grandkids and communication has been horrible and toxic, you might be at the bottom right of this matrix right now. But what's important for you to hear is that you can move to different zones, and there are certain pathways that can help you do that. But first, let's dive into each one of these zones. So zone 1, like I said, is the cooperation zone. Again, this is the ideal zone where grandparents and parents are working together and communicating openly and respectfully. Grandparents have full access to the grandchildren, and even better is when there's collaboration and even championing going on, where the parents are championing the grandparents and really encouraging that engagement between their children and the grandparents. In this zone, it's really important, if you find yourself here, just focus on expressing gratitude, because this is something that doesn't happen every day. This is the ideal and where we want to get to. Zone 2 is the caution zone. This is when communication has become negative or non-existent. I recommend that you don't ignore the warning signs that are often present here. There's a conflict that needs to be addressed, or you may risk losing access to grandchildren. Strategic use and sequencing of grit, grace, and gratitude are recommended to improve communication and move back into Zone 1. Zone 3 is the challenge zone. So this is where communication is still open and respectful, but access has been limited or cut off completely. Maybe you just haven't heard from them for a little while, and you just haven't been able to see the grandkids, or they've been avoiding you, or maybe they just have brought a concern to your attention in a respectful way that you messed up, you crossed a boundary, and they wanted to tell you about it. And you might not even realize that it was a problem, but they are communicating it to you. It's important for you to address the conflict that's happening here tactfully, and you want to maintain that healthy communication that you have as much as possible. Strategic use and sequencing of grit, grace, and gratitude are recommended to regain access. Commit to meaningful growth. And another word is change. You got to commit to being able to change and adjust based upon whatever the conflict is. Zone 4 is the cancellation zone, and unfortunately, there are many, many grandparents out there who are in this zone. Communication has been negative and disrespectful, completely shut off. Grandparents, they've been partially or completely cut off from their grandkids. They've essentially been canceled. We live in a cancel culture, and that's what's happened. And maybe you're one of them if you're watching this. Strategic use and sequencing of grit, grace, and gratitude are recommended to improve communication. It's also important to commit to meaningful growth to regain access. So the key takeaways are that any grandparent can go from Zone 1 to any of the other zones at any time, really. There's no set path that everyone follows, though when looking back, many grandparents report missing or overlooking warning signs that led to the cancellation zone. They say hindsight's 20/20, and I often hear from grandparents who, when looking back at the situation, they realized that while they thought they were in Zone 1, the cooperation zone, there were some warning signs, and they were really in the caution zone. They just didn't really realize it, or they just chose to ignore it. And soon they found themselves in Zone 4, which is the cancellation zone, right? They were cut off completely, and they had some terrible communication that was happening between both parties. And sometimes you might go from Zone 1 right to Zone 4, cancellation. And that happens too. I've heard of that happening with grandparents, where there was a disagreement, there was a divorce, a death. There are a lot of things that happen where what is the status quo suddenly gets upset, and life throws you a curveball, and all of a sudden the whole world has changed for you. And that happens too. Another takeaway is that strategic communication and commitment to meaningful growth are the best paths to getting back to the cooperation zone and regaining access. And the optimal sequencing and use of grit, grace, and gratitude, which I call the 3 G's of growth, can help immensely. Growth is uncomfortable. That's why they call it growing pains, right? We've experienced this all our lives, growing up as kids, and turning into adolescents, into adults. Think about your life and all the times that you've had to grow. Not only physically, but mentally, spiritually, all these different ways. And I bet when you look back at that, I know certainly in my life, I think about those times of growth, and there was pain involved. It was not easy. It's not something, in most cases, I would have chosen if I had a choice to go through it. But, something made me go through that, and I had to face what was happening, right? And that's when I grew the most. So I would say this, one of the biggest takeaways of this whole webinar, hope you walk away, is that when you're experiencing these times, reframe your mindset to look at this as an opportunity for growth, that you will grow. And not only yourself as a person, but you have the opportunity to help others grow as well. You can help them grow just by the way that you react to the circumstances that you're facing. So choose growth. And it's important to, when you think about conflict, you think about achieving a resolution that mitigates the whole conflict, that you can actually break through conflict. You can grow through conflict. But on the other hand, you're probably experiencing grief as well. And there are a lot of different types of grief, and we don't have the time in this webinar to dive into all of them. But you're facing possibly ambiguous grief. You may be facing complicated grief. There's a lot of different types of grief again. But my belief is, and this is based upon the research by Tonkin, that you grow around your grief. And what I mean by that is, if you think about a plant, like take one of these plants back here, and when say it was really young, and you take a chunk out of a leaf, right? And it's not enough to kill the plant, or might leave a little scar. Of course it will, but the plant continues to grow, and it continues to grow around it, and pretty soon you have a fuller plant. And that little nick is still there. You can see it, but it's not as noticeable anymore because time has passed and it's continued to grow. And I think grief acts very similar, that the pain doesn't ever truly go away. In a lot of circumstances, we think about the loss of our loved ones. I can still feel the pain in a lot of these examples in my own life, but I've grown around that, and I've grown to be a better person, and I've learned from the legacies that they've grown within me and helped to cultivate. And time continues to march on, and we continue to grow if we choose to move forward and to continue to grow instead of just being stuck and mired in one place, right? So that's what I have to share about committing to change, in that, and specifically growth, in that it's not easy. It almost never is easy. But choose the route that leads to growth, that allows you to make a change or an adjustment in your life, even if it feels uncomfortable, right? That's where you should focus. And on that topic, when it comes to this specific circumstance, this experience of alienation and estrangement, it's important to take a path that is focused on strategy and really be clear about what your goals are. If your goals are to see your grandkids again, then you need to choose the path of strategy and growth, because that's what's going to lead you to this success of the goal that you have. It's not about being right, morally right, or it's not about any sort of judgment. And that's where a lot of people get stuck. They think, well, I did nothing wrong, or I was right, and I want them to know I was right, And until they apologize, I'm not gonna apologize. And this has to be thought of differently. You need to think about this strategically. You need to think about, how do you get to the point to where you see your grandkids again, because that's your main goal. And if that means that you need to sacrifice some of your pride and let go of some of the ego, or the need to be right, the need to be, to have an apology from the parents. I get it. Trust me, when someone does something that's wrong, and I feel like they've wronged me in some way, or I deserve an apology and I don't get it, that really irks me. I get it. Trust me. But in order for growth to happen, for us to move forward, we have to let that go. We have to focus on strategy to get the grandkids back. And there are also certain elements, as I mentioned, that will help you as you're working to communicate strategically and commit to growth. And I have a framework that I developed called the Legacy Gardening Framework that walks people step by step through how to cultivate and grow these certain elements, and usually I call them values, in their own life and the lives of others in order to bloom fully, in order to really achieve the goal that they're looking to achieve. And I use this framework in a lot of the masterclasses that I teach. But today, since we only have a limited amount of time, I wanted to focus on 3 specific elements and values that I believe will really help you as you're moving forward in your reconciliation journey. And I call these the 3 G's of growth. The 3 G's of growth are gratitude, grace, and grit. And so let's start with gratitude. Gratitude is a value that I define as the act of fully recognizing, appreciating, and reciprocating the ever-present blessings of life. It is so critically important to practice and cultivate gratitude in your life, because what it does is it clears your lenses. It's just like if you wear contacts or you have glasses and you have to clear the lenses every once in a while, or take your contacts out and you put the cleansing fluid in there. That's what gratitude does. It allows you to see the world around you with a clearer picture of what's truly going on, because we get gunked up by anger or jealousy or rage and greed and all these negative things in our life that happen, and it distorts our worldview and our view of others as well. What gratitude does is it cleans that out. It provides us with a clear picture of what's going on and how we've truly been blessed with what's around us. If you're watching this right now, that means that you have a device that is capable of watching this on the internet, which is this amazing thing that connects us all and allows us to learn from any distance as long as we have an internet connection. It's amazing if you think about this. People 100 years ago did not have this tool that we have now. It's incredible. Even if you think about just the value of breathing. I mean, when's the last time you just were thankful that you could take a deep breath just like that, And when is the last time you took a deep breath? It feels good. It feels good. If you haven't tried that, I encourage you, take a deep breath and feel that release and be grateful for that you're here right now, that you have the opportunity to do something good. Gratitude provides clarity, releases fear and anxiety, and instills confidence. It helps you move out of the scarcity mindset and into one of abundance. This is critically important as you engage with parents, especially those who are alienating you out of a desire for power. Gratitude helps give you the necessary perspective and pulls you out of the swamp. Gratitude helps you from falling into the demonization trap by humanizing others and thus making them easier to love. And that leads us, in a way, to the next element, which is grace. I define grace as freely providing unearned and undeserved kindness or favor to yourself and others. Now, I hope you noticed that I first included extending that to yourself. And I think that's very important. As you're going along this reconciliation journey, you need to look after yourself and your health, your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health, your emotional health. You need to focus on you and make sure that your cup is full in order for you to really make a difference and to find that energy that you're going to need in this reconciliation journey to move forward. So first, practice that own sense of grace for yourself. If you've made mistakes, as we all have, there are no perfect parents, right? Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for anything that you've done. And make sure that you do that for yourself first. That, you don't have the perfect family. And guess what? Nobody does. Nobody has a perfect family. We all have conflict. And that's the big thing is most people, they feel they got to hide this and they're ashamed about what's going on in their families. Well, guess what? Your neighbors are experiencing something similar. The person in church that looks like they have everything perfect, they're going through things that you don't know about. Everybody's fighting their own battles. They are. You just don't know about it. So it's important for you to first look at yourself, forgive yourself, practice that own self-compassion. Take care of yourself first, and that's going to help you. Next, move on to others. Now again, you notice that in the definition, I talked about grace being something that isn't deserved, that it's not earned by anyone. The person that you're extending grace to, they didn't earn this, but it's a gift to them. And that's important because this gift helps free you of the emotions that are dragging you down, that are causing this view of the world that is not reality. That's really giving you a distorted lens, right, of what's happening. And it's affecting you. It's affecting your mental health and your physical health and your emotional health, and maybe even other relationships that you have with others. So this gift of grace to others is actually a gift to yourself in the end. So I know it's hard. I'll be the first to admit that. I remember specifically a time when I was betrayed, and I really felt that feeling of being betrayed by someone. And maybe those of you watching now, you might feel this now, being betrayed maybe by your son or daughter. But I was in middle school, and it was a new town and a new school. And just like all middle schoolers, teenagers, I was just turning 13, and I just wanted to have friends, and I wanted to fit in, and also I had a crush on this girl. And I remember that I finally mustered the courage to ask her on a date. And so we became boyfriend and girlfriend, and I remember we went to this dance that was happening, and things were really good this first couple weeks. I was on top of the world, cloud nine. And all of a sudden I noticed that people were looking at me differently. And then I started to hear the whispers. And then finally, a friend came up to me and told me that she heard a rumor that my girlfriend was pregnant. And I remember at the time, just turning 13, thinking, that's impossible. I know how this. By that time, I'd understood, how this works, like how babies came to be, and it wasn't the stork, right? So I understood how things work, and I knew that it was impossible that she would be pregnant, especially after we'd just been dating a couple weeks, and she gave me my first kiss, and so I was thinking, there's no way that this could be true. And it got to the point where I started hearing it more and more from people, and I got so angry, and I just had this desire to defend her. Because, when I asked her if it was true, she told me it wasn't. And I felt like she was being attacked. And so I remember I went to the middle school principal, the vice principal at the time, and I was talking to him about it, and I was so up in arms. I wanted to make this announcement over the PA system to dispel this rumor and say that she wasn't pregnant. And thank goodness he didn't let me do that. Even as hard as I tried to convince him that I just needed to do this to squash this rumor. But yeah, he wouldn't let me. And I remember I was just so infuriated because so many people were looking at me like I was soon to be a father, and they just had all these things to say about me and her as well. And then one day, my girlfriend, she called me to her house. It wasn't long after the dance, and she told me that the rumor was true, that she was pregnant. And obviously it wasn't my baby. It happened because of a party she had went to, I guess, before we were together. But all the circumstances are in the past. But I just remember how betrayed I felt and angry I was that I'd been lied to. And I was bullied because of this. People still thought it was me who was the father, and even when I said that's not my baby, and they still thought it was me. And I remember it really affected me. Fast forward about 20 years, and I learned that I was going to become a father for the first time, and with my wife. And I remember the excitement and the joy that came along with that, and also the fear and the anxiety of, what's going to be like when, am I going to be good enough as a father? And, just hoping that the birth happened and everyone was healthy, right? And there's a lot that goes into that moment. I'm sure you recall as well. And, I started to think about back at the time in middle school, and I started to think about what it must have been like for her as an 8th grader becoming pregnant, and all that she must have went through during that time. And I reached out to her right around that time when I was becoming a father, just to talk to her, because I hadn't talked to her in years. It had been 20 years since our middle school days. And so I reached out to just check in and also just to tell her I'm sorry that I had completely just gone my own way, and that I was angry about what had happened, and that I wanted to find out where she was at now, and she told me that her son had grown up and he was had graduated high school, and she was doing great, and she had her own business and a house, and things were just worked out well for her. And I thought, I'm so glad. I was so grateful that it all worked out for her, because I realized that at that time I had so much anger about the situation, and I just wanted to completely distance myself and live my life, that I didn't have the empathy that I needed for grace. And I think that's the big key, and why I share this story in the first place is empathy is really important for you to find in this situation. And in order to really extend this grace, and in order for you to relieve yourself of some of this baggage, these anchors that are tied to you, this anger that you might be feeling, this resentment, it's important for you to find that empathy, to find that grace that you can extend to that person, even if you feel like they're the worst person in the world, right? I get it being angry and thinking, how can someone do that to me, right? But it's, in the end, it's not only a gift to them, it's a gift to yourself. So I encourage you, find that empathy. Think about the things in your life where you can relate to that person who is causing the estrangement, the alienation. Give the benefit of the doubt. Nobody knows what every person has been through, how that person grew up, what they had to face as a child, what they face now currently. Nobody really knows that except for the person who's in those shoes. So give the person the benefit of the doubt. Think about where you have commonalities, where you can empathize truly with what they've gone through. Maybe it's as a mother and they're a mother. You've gone through pregnancy. You've gone through raising a child. You have a lot of different possible ways that you can relate to this person. And that's the key too, is Recognize the humanity. No matter what they've done to you, they're not some sort of demon. They're not some sort of monster. Don't give them that sort of power, which they clearly don't have. They are a human. They have and probably are making mistakes, just like every one of us have and are making mistakes. So recognize the humanity first. That's a good first step. And don't give unnecessary power that really doesn't even exist to another person. Recognize that they're just another human. The next is grit, and I define grit as demonstrating courage and resilience through unrelenting pursuit of a long-term goal. Life is full of irony and many curveballs, and sometimes we just get knocked flat on our backs, and the world comes crashing around us, right? I remember right around that time when I reached back out to my middle school girlfriend, I also was having dinner with a family friend who I grew up seeing. He had lived with us for a little bit, and I considered him family. And he was like my uncle. He was my mom's high school sweetheart and one of my dad's best friends. And I really looked up to him. And I just loved being around him. And as an adult, he just happened to live in the same town that I did. And so I went out with my wife to his house and his wife's house, and we were playing cards and having dinner. And I remember that suddenly he brought out this family album to show me some pictures, and I had never seen his family before, so I was pretty excited to see, some of these pictures. And so he flipped it open, and I remember my hair on my arms just started to stand up, because when he flipped the page, I saw what looked like me in this old picture. And it was one of those moments where the world just stopped. I looked at my wife, and she saw it too. And I started to look at him, and I saw that he had like the same mole pattern on his arm that I have. And I thought that's pretty weird. So I did some investigation, and long story short, I ended up discovering that he was my biological father, and not the dad that raised me. And here I am in my early 30s learning this. And there's just this mix of emotions that just flooded me instantly. And I had to work through over a couple months trying to figure out what's the best approach for really validating this and really understanding. And then, if it is true, what's the best approach for revealing this to my family, to my dad who raised me for over 30 years, to my mom, to this man who's my biological father. What's the best way to do this without wrecking everybody's lives, right? So I prayed about it a lot, and I thought I went to a counselor, and I finally came up with a plan. I ended up, again, long story short, I had a DNA test done through one of the more popular kits with the dad who raised me, and it turned out, that with the relative finder, there was a 0% match between he and I. And I remember on my way down, this is about a 3-hour drive to go visit him, to reveal to my father that he's not my biological father. I remember trying to find that courage that it takes to have difficult conversations. And that is a big part of grit, is finding that courage to have those talks, that are could be life-changing. And you might be thinking about that right now as you're thinking about, how do I mend this relationship with the parents in order to, eventually see the grandkids? How do I fix this? How do I build a bridge? And a lot of it comes down to communication. And I'll tell you, it was difficult. There were tears when I revealed, from both parties, when I revealed to my dad that he wasn't my biological father. It does take grit to do something like that, but know that you have what it takes to do that. What helps is understanding, thinking ahead what you're going to say and what does that strategic communication look like. It helps to have that gratitude and confidence and grace going into the situation so that you have the right mindset about it. To speak truth with love is so critically important. And that sort of grit is going to help you move forward. And there are ways that you can, practice this in other areas of your life too when it comes to grit. Making sure that you don't shy away from tough conversations in other areas of your life as well. And that helps you to become more confident. And then understanding, when you're having these conversations, how to regulate the emotions that come up and not to be overcome by your emotions. And that's a whole practice in itself, and working on that. Grit can help you. Fostering that courage that already exists within you, that can be a great asset and is an essential element as you're pursuing this reconciliation journey, to have that grit. Find it within yourself. Surround yourself with people who also bring that out of you, that can help encourage you in times where you're fearful and you don't know if you can find the words. We're going to talk a little bit about that here in just a minute with strategic communication. A lot of times people tend to focus first on what do I say? But really, when you look at communication, there's so much more to communication. It's about positioning, it's about nonverbals, it's about the timing, when is the right time, it's how you say it. There are so many different factors that influence the way that a message is received in order to really reach your goal. So first, let's talk about knowing your audience, and that's a big key. So talking about the gatekeepers, the ones who are regulating the access to your grandchildren. One may be your child. The other could be, their child's partner. One of them or both of them are causing this estrangement or alienation. They've made the choice to limit or cut you completely off with the grandkids. You have the grandchildren themselves. And then you have others like relatives and friends and the public to think about. So some questions to ask yourself for each audience are, where do they spend time, especially online? How do they prefer to communicate? Whether that's phone calls, text, email, social media messages, etc. What's their communication style? Are they more direct? Are they more loquacious? Do they talk a lot? What are they like when they're communicating? What makes them smile or laugh? What triggers them in a negative way? What does winning look like for them? That's big. Understanding really what are their motives? What are their goals? What are they passionate about? And finally, if you put yourself in their shoes right now, what would your day look and feel like? That is a great practice of empathy, is just imagine yourself in that other person's shoes. What does that look like for them? What are they going through? And of course, try to inform that vision based upon your conversations with them. So it's actually, representative of what's actually happening. But even the practice of imagining that can help foster that empathy that can help you with extending grace. Next, know yourself. Where do you tend to spend time online? How do you prefer to communicate? What's your communication style? What makes you smile or laugh? What triggers you in a negative way? And what does winning look like for you? Knowing your audience is an essential part of communicating strategically and reaching your goals. Next, let's talk about your position. Again, understanding where you're at can be very advantageous. It's really important to check your mindset and your attitudes. Lean into gratitude, creativity, and hope. Have the confidence that you will be reconnected with your grandchildren someday. And when it happens, you'll share with them anything you've created for them. They'll know you, and you'll have the opportunity to develop a strong, loving bond with them. Remember that what you're going through now is not the whole book, but just a few chapters of your story. Next, check the temperature and the relational climate. Is a situation too heated and volatile with the grandchildren's parents right now, or has it cooled? Look back at that grandparent-parent relationship matrix and just check where you're at and which zone. Remember that the parents may have control over the kids now, but kids have a way of growing up and someday becoming adults and making their own choices. Make sure that you're actively preparing and positioning for that day. Seek understanding and healing. Keep the end goal in mind and be strategic. Ask yourself, is this about being right about everything? Or is it about being reconciled? A lot of times, it won't be both. Now let's get into the what part of this equation, and that's really your messaging. To the gatekeepers, the messaging is pretty similar, but for your own child, there is an advantage. And that's that you've spent time together and you've had good memories. At some point in their life, you can think about good memories. Use those to your advantage. Let them know that you love them unconditionally. You remember the good times shared with raising them. You weren't perfect then, admit it, but you're seeking to heal now and make a positive change. Ask them what you can do to help make things better. To the child's partner, who may be the one alienating you, let them know that you love them unconditionally, that you seek a supportive and healthy relationship with them, and ask them what you can do to make things better between you. If you're able to talk to the grandchildren, or if they reach out to you, let them know that you love them unconditionally, and that you'll never lose hope and you look forward to the day when you're back together again. For relatives and friends, it's important to have discretion in what you share with them. If they ask, let them know that you love your grandchildren and their parents unconditionally. You'll be there for them when they need you. And if you feel comfortable about disclosing that there's a conflict, you could just say that you desire to heal the relationship and move forward together. And I'd really caution against sharing too much information with other relatives and friends. And I think this is where it's important to have a trusted pastor or a counselor, a therapist, others in your life, on your team who you can confide in, who you don't have to worry about them sharing information that you disclose to them in confidence. And that happens with family members, that gossip happens. Or I know a case with a grandparent who was a student who revealed or made a comment about a daughter-in-law as to her hairdresser. And it just happened that her son also visited the same hairdresser. And that comment got shared. And that really triggered a lot of the estrangement and the conflict that ensued for years because of what was shared. So be very careful about what you share with friends and relatives. They may be well-meaning and they love you and you love them, but chances are they're not experienced with grandparent alienation, though they'll probably have an opinion, and there is a risk that what you share can be shared on and impact this journey in a negative way. Your messaging should avoid the following: blaming or finger-pointing, venting, victimizing, demonizing or bad-mouthing, me versus them, disclosing too much or gossiping, focusing on the pain and harm done instead of the path forward, refusing to accept responsibility or apologize, and holding a grudge. So now that we've covered more about knowing your audience, the position you're in, the messaging itself, let's talk about the delivery. So here are some general best practices for your approach and delivery. First, incorporate gratitude. Before the conversation, think of 3 specific things about the person for which you can truly be grateful. Genuinely express gratitude with the person near the beginning of the conversation. Remember, it's important to be sincere here. Next, give grace. When another person expresses something about you, maybe something that you've done that triggers them, don't launch immediately into defense mode or attack mode. Acknowledge their feelings. Thank them for sharing. And if you can commit to growing and making a positive change, commit to it. Next, maintain grit. Don't give up on guiding the conversation to what's needed for healing to progress so that reconciliation can happen. In other words, don't get distracted or caught up in emotions. Align yourself with the preferred communication method of your audience. If they prefer texting, text them. If they prefer phone calls, use phone call. If they prefer Facebook Messenger, use Facebook Messenger. Keep messages brief and use as a stepping stone to longer, more meaningful interactions. For example, you might start with a text that could lead to a video chat or a phone call that could then lead to an in-person meeting and eventually a visit with grandchildren. For the gatekeepers and your child in specifically, remind them of the good times. Express genuine gratitude and appreciation. Don't overload them. Ask how to best support and heal the relationship. Focus on small steps forward. For the child's partner, which is your daughter-in-law or son-in-law, express genuine gratitude and appreciation. Don't overload them. Ask how to best support and heal your relationship. Again, focus on small steps forward. And for the grandchildren, if you're able to communicate with them, make sure that you're creating and strategically placing what I call digital breadcrumbs online to increase your online visibility and discoverability. Stick to recommended content guidelines for public content. Post positive, encouraging, and educational content. Make sure that you consider continuing to develop and prepare memory box and digital treasure chest content for the day when reconciliation happens. So one of my favorite reconciliation stories is one of a grandfather who had been cut off from his grandson for over 13 years. And one day, his grandson showed up at his doorstep. And his grandfather answered the door, and his grandson was there. And their eyes locked, and he could see that his grandson was angry at him. And so he invited him in, and they sat down, and he said, "Grandpa, why didn't you come looking for me? Why didn't you try harder?" And his grandfather, who had been trying to get access to his grandson and never gave up, said, "Hold on one second." And he went into the other room, and he walked back in with his box. And in this box were newspaper clippings and stories and photos and all these assets, this incredible content that his grandfather had collected and gathered and saved for his grandson just for this day when reconciliation was going to happen. And of course, there were tears as the grandson opened it up and they went through the box together. And that's called a memory box. That's something that I highly encourage you, if you're experiencing this, keep a memory box that you can put these memories into for that day when you're reconciled, that demonstrates that you've never given up hope, that you've continued to love your grandchildren throughout this whole ordeal, no matter how long it takes. And it will also help accelerate the relationship going forward when you have that. Now, I've created a digital version of this that I call a digital treasure chest. And I teach about how to specifically create this digital treasure chest for your grandchildren as part of my online reconciliation strategies for alienated grandparents masterclass. Be sure to check that out. But essentially, it's like the digital version of a memory box. But we also apply the legacy gardening framework to specifically focus on your life stories and the values that you're looking to cultivate in the lives of your grandchildren. A few other best practices for your approach and delivery to grandchildren. If you're told not to reach out to your grandchildren from the parents, don't do it. Respect their wishes. If grandchildren reach out to you as children, focus the conversation on how much you love them. Don't mention anything about the alienation. Save your conversations about alienation for when they're old enough to process it and are adults, free to make their own decisions. Now, in my masterclasses and coaching, I recommend that alienated and estranged grandparents put together what I call a strategic engagement plan. And here are some of the essential elements of that plan. This plan should include: who are your audiences? Answer the questions asked earlier in this presentation in the audience section. What's your current position with them and yourself? How will you incorporate gratitude, grace, and grit when engaging with these audiences? Which audiences will you reach out to in the next 30 days? And what communication channel will you use? What will be your messaging to these audiences? Now, I highly recommend that you create this strategic engagement plan for yourself. It's like they say, the best time to have a map is before you enter the woods. Well, you're probably already in the woods, but this plan can help you get out of the woods. It's going to help you build a bridge with the parents and then see eventually your grandkids again, right? So this is important to spend some time to create that. And also it's important to surround yourself with the right reconciliation team. Make sure you have people who understand what grandparent alienation is. Whether that's a therapist, a counselor, if you're pursuing litigation, make sure that those trusted advisors understand what this whole ordeal is about and what the different characteristics are that exist in these circumstances. Because not a lot of thought leaders and experts out there are well versed in this sort of phenomenon yet. So it's important for you to make sure when you're vetting your team, when you're really forming that group of trusted advisors, that they're aware of that. Everyone has different skill sets and they're good at different things. So don't just limit yourself to having an attorney or just a therapist or just a psychologist or just a communications coach. Think about what's the right combination for you as you're moving forward in your own skill set. Who might come alongside and help complement the other team members, but also supplement anything that's missing with what you currently have. In summary, strategic engagement is about communication. It's more effective when planned and practiced in advance. Considering your audience is critically important. Prepare yourself by starting from a position of empowerment, positivity, and confidence. Seek healing and reconciliation, not righteousness or justification. Be strategic. Incorporate the 3 G's of growth: gratitude, grace, and grit. And your action items are to create your strategic engagement plan, form your reconciliation team, and review resources that we have available for you at grandparentsacademy.com. Again, we have masterclasses, online support groups, and resources specifically for estranged and alienated grandparents at grandparentsacademy.com. There's more information down below. Be sure to click the link so that you can take advantage of those resources to help you along your reconciliation journey. And it really is a journey. It can be a long journey. It could be a short one. It depends on every situation. But no matter where you're at now, I hope that the information that was presented in this webinar will be helpful for you, that you found some insights that maybe came from a different perspective than maybe what you've heard before. But the 3 G's of growth, the grandparent-parent relationship matrix, the strategic engagement plan, I hope all of these tools and elements can help you as you're moving forward in your journey. And just remember, no matter where you're at, don't give up hope. There's always hope for reconciliation, and you can do this. Find the right team, surround yourself with the right people and the right tools, and never give up. Choose growth, and that will help you as you reconnect with your loved ones. Take care.